So, in my last two videos, I discussed different examples of writing pieces in response to this prompt. What is the theme of the selection you've analyzed? What techniques or devices does the poet use to build this theme? Provide embedded text evidence to support your answer. Follow up your evidence with clear and supportive commentary. So, the two that I discussed were one of them was very weak and needed a lot of work. You can certainly watch the video on that one and find out why it is that this one is weak and what it is that you need to include in it to make it better. My next video, I actually showed you what was included and I kind of talked through some of the pitfalls of this particular response. So, this is why I said that this one was the revision of the first, but not the perfect essay. It's a we're getting there kind of essay. And I did note some of the things that were wrong, and I showed you how to very simply use the enter button and the tab button to create paragraphs, which is very important in an essay. All right, and so what I want to do now is I want to talk to you about what a good essay looks like. And it's not necessarily just the length of this particular response, it's more the content of it. So you'll notice I don't have a whole lot of things going on in the intro that are much different from the original one. It's still two or three lines like this one was. In fact, it starts out in the eagle. Alfred Lord Tennyson is using a moment in the life of an eagle to show nature's majesty. I didn't change that too much. Actually, I didn't change that at all. That was a good intro sentence. Um, I did add in the on the surface, it seems like the eagle in this poem is doing something very basic hunting. I wanted to kind of re emphasize I didn't necessarily need to do that. But I kind of thought it was a good segue to my next part of my thesis. Um, in this one, it says Tennyson utilizes simile and personification to reinforce this idea of being majestic. Honestly, I could have reiterated that and just simply added in alliteration to it, and this paragraph would have been the same basic thing. The important part here is that you are identifying part of the theme. So remember our theme nature's beauty exists in even the most basic moment. So we've got that moment. And I'm sorry, I'm skipping around a lot here. I have to go back up to the prompt. In order to fulfill the rest of your prompt, it's asking you what techniques or devices are being used. So it's very important to actually list those. And as we learned in the previous video about the okay response, we were missing a conversation of alliteration, and it made the entire piece a little bit more confusing to the reader. So again, this isn't about what you understand. It's about what words you're using, what ideas you're using to convey to your reader so that your reader will understand the thoughts that are going on in your head about this piece. If you're not having very many thoughts about the piece, then you probably want to do a little bit more planning, and so you may want to take a look at the planning video that I created. All right, so important. I've got the conversation about the thematic moments and nature's beauty thing going on, and I have three techniques. You'll notice I color coded these so you can see that each one of these is showing up in a topic sentence for the body paragraphs, and they are showing up in the same order that I list them in the thesis statement. So that's very important. And really, this entire paragraph it's the intro, but really it's kind of serving the purpose of being a multi-sentence thesis. And that's okay. Sometimes you've got one sentence thesis, sometimes you have multiple. Okay. So I have a topic sentence in each one of these paragraphs. Tennyson utilizes, remember we talked about that being important. You don't want to say the poem uses, because the poem's not using anything. It's the poet that's using it. Tennyson utilizes alliteration not just as a musical effect, which is its normal purpose, but as something to convey the eagle's persona. So now I know that in this paragraph, if I were the reader, I would know in this paragraph that the writer is going to talk to me about who the eagle is, what visual art is being conveyed as to who this particular eagle is. The next topic sentence, when coupled with the simile in which he falls like a thunderbolt, that's much better embedding of text evidence than tacking it on at the end with the colon, though they both work. This is really kind of the goal, to use text evidence within your own idea. Okay. When coupled with the simile in which he falls like a thunderbolt to capture his prey in the last line, the alliteration takes on a slightly different meaning in that the reader realizes that the eagle is perched far above his prey high in a tree. This is not the best topic sentence, but at least I know that I'm going to be talking about this exact simile within this paragraph. And then when you read the rest of the paragraph, you'll see that that is indeed what happens. Okay. And then the other topic sentence, in addition to using alliteration and simile, Tennyson also uses personification to reinforce his idea of nature being majestic. That's the only topic sentence that really came back around to the theme, but that's okay because the other conversations within the paragraphs were doing just that. And so maybe this kind of is better that we're not doing that in every single topic sentence, because maybe that takes away it being a very formulaic response. It's still a little formulaic, but it's not as. You'll notice I'm not saying first, second, third, which is kind of important in helping the flow of your writing work a little bit better. All right, so I did add this entire conversation about alliteration. And so all of that is new from the previous response. Again, if you didn't see the previous video, you may want to backtrack and take a look at that to see why that response was not as good as it could be. Okay, so this paragraph says Tennyson's use of alliteration is not da 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 da. We already said that one. In Tennyson's first line, he describes the eagle as clasping the crag with crooked, and then he says hands, but I just used the alliterative part. Remember, I used brackets to show that I changed the tense of the verb. The use of alliteration in this line shares the harsh sound of C. Tennyson has clearly selected this sound on purpose, as he could have used a much softer sound, such as the W he uses later when he describes the wrinkled C. Since the eagle is not weak, softer sounds would not work with this creature. All of that is commentary. That's why I chose this moment of alliteration. It wasn't, ooh, look, there's alliteration. It's this alliteration is there on purpose. And now I'm describing its purpose. The letter C sounds more predatorial. That is the eagle's persona. Okay, so the next line, I didn't change much in this one. So all I did with this particular response is I added that alliteration paragraph, because now to move from this clasping crag with crooked hands to this makes a little bit more sense. I probably could have still made it a little bit more obvious. Okay, but see, that's the deal with writing, is it's always a process. It's always in transition or in the moment of being revised. So writing is never ending. We just have to kind of find a point where it's as good as it can possibly be to convey your line of thought. Okay, so it says when coupled with the simile in the last line. So now I've looked at the first line, I'm looking at the last line. Oh, how interesting that this poem could actually like connect the first line and the last line together. Of course it does. It's not like he accidentally wrote this poem. It was something that he worked on and perfected it, and so on and so forth. Okay, the alliteration takes on a slightly different meaning in that the reader realizes the eagle is perched far above his prey high in a tree. Okay, so no, I didn't talk about the alliteration and the clasping the crag with crooked hands in this paragraph, but I do right here. So that's good. And then really none of this has changed from the previous particular response. In fact, you can kind of take a look at that and see that it's very similar to this particular paragraph. Okay. It's not exact. I did kind of embed the text evidence a little differently, but it is very similar. Okay. And then I do have an addition to using alliteration and simile. In the other one, I just kind of jumped in with the conversation about personification. There's nothing wrong with that, but I wanted to make it better by providing a transition from the other two body paragraphs to the conversation about personification. And I did that just by saying that, in addition to using alliteration and simile. And then I jump into the conversation, and honestly, I didn't change much of this either. So if you take a look at this one, in comparison to what I wrote in this one, there's not really anything that's different. Same basic conversation. So really what I did in this particular paragraph is I closed up any questions in the reader's mind. I closed up gaps in my thought process by adding in that conversation of alliteration so that when we got to the paragraph about the simile, it started to make more sense. I also cleaned up that weirdness where we started our analysis talking about the last line of the poem. So instead, we started the analysis talking about the first line, and then we jumped to the last line, and that's okay. And then we kind of talked about what was going on in the middle of it. Okay. And then I didn't change much of anything in the conclusion because the conclusion was pretty good in the other one as well. Okay. Alrighty, so I hope this helps you to see what the thought process is as you are moving through writing your response. And hopefully, if you were writing a response that looked like this, you are able to start moving it toward this particular response. Again, I have videos for talking you through that, so you might want to go ahead and watch those videos. And if you did something like this, maybe you can even practice using paragraphs because this is ultimately the end goal for our year this year is for you to be able to write something that has an introductory paragraph, some solid body paragraphs, and a conclusion. And of course, the ultimate goal is to write one not necessarily that has 3 body paragraphs, but that has all of the ideas wrapped together so that the reader's not left with any questions.